it's a very it's an honor to in fact, present some of the findings of our research as part of the Religare project. Basically, for the Turkish case, it was interesting to see that, despite the fact that there has been a lot of studies on discrimination on grounds of gender and disability, somehow discrimination on grounds of religion or faith have been much less studied, and they were far less traceable and more ideologically grounded. So the fact that the discrimination on grounds of religion or belief and studies are more ideologically grounded, we can basically take it to the fact that religion has been a controversial issue and a long enduring question, and its place in the society, in Turkish society, has been a very controversial question since the establishment of the Republic. So basically, two things seem to dominate studies on discrimination on grounds of religion in the workplace in Turkey. The first one is headscarf, the issue of headscarf. And the other one is the rather suspicious attitude and discrimination against religious minorities. So basically, the reason why we find less studies and we can actually trace discrimination on religious grounds in a less traceable way is somehow also due to the peculiarities of the Turkish legal system, which demonstrates that Turkish society is not a litigate society, that only few incidents make it to the court, and it's not only about religion, but it's also about, or discrimination on grounds of religion, but also about harassment, sexual harassment, violence, and so on. So in general, few incidents make it to the court, and there's a tendency to solve a lot of issues in the workplace in terms of discrimination and harassment through personal relations and through some kind of personal and unofficial arbitration. So, in fact, discrimination on the grounds of religion and belief are much more common than we know, than we actually hear and we know. In addition to that, in fact, we have this state discourse in Turkey that constantly says that 99% of the Turkish society is Muslim, which kind of conceals the religious diversity in the country, and it gives the impression of a religiously homogeneous society. So what have been the findings of this research? Basically, let me tell you, how we did it. Basically, the research is based on 29 expert interviews conducted with representatives of religious communities, of NGOs, and political parties. So in the first place, what we find is that there's a problem with the Turkish legal system. So applying to the court is not a common strategy. It takes time. Personal relations are used more often as a strategy of solving disputes. There's a lot of risk, in applying to the court, such as exposition of one's religious identity, which causes defamation. And it can also risk, future unemployment, in fact, future employment, that is, it can cause, in fact, unemployment. Basically, we have also found out that besides the issue of headscarf, which has been studied a lot, and a lot of research has been done on that, we also found out that there has been a difficulty to prove discrimination, not in cases necessarily related with headscarf, which is also the case, but cases related with headscarf are more clearly identifiable. But in other cases, it's harder to identify discriminatory practices, such as, in the cases of non-Sunni Muslim beliefs. In many cases that, we have found out, in fact, administrators, superiors, bosses rejected the accusation and brought forth a variety, in fact, of different reasons for the dismissal of an employee, for example. So basically, in our research, we have found, discrimination based on headscarf, which is increasingly, more rare because of the changes in Turkish legal system, in Turkish State Employee Act, in relation to the laws on civil servants and so on. But there's a more serious discrimination that takes place against members of faith groups other than the majority Sunni Hanifite religion. So we find a lot of discrimination in the workplace in relation to Alevis, to Christians, and to non-practicing Muslims, in fact, to non-practicing Sunnis, in other words. So the range of discriminatory practices range from insulting remarks from their bosses and co-workers, reassignment to unpopular units, not being entrusted with real responsibility, being passed over for promotion, disadvantages due to different religious practices, such as, in the month of Ramadan, non-fasting becomes a source of, the assignment of extra tasks without extra pay, closed canteens, and group pressure. At the same time, non-attendance to Friday prayers seems to, again, assign, extra workload for non-practicing Sunnis or Christians or Alevis. Again, in job interviews, we have found out that the name, birthplace, such stigmatizing, identity markers have been, an important source of problem. It looks like, the Christian community, for example, is usually self-employed or they're employed by other Christians. There's a systematic exclusion from civil service and army for non-Sunni people. Protestants in our research have confessed that they usually hide their identity, or they try not to change the religion marker of their identity card so that they won't be discriminated against, in job interviews or in workplaces. And there has been a common argument that came out of our research that state regulations mean little as long as persistence of prejudices, continue. So basically, we can draw basically three conclusions out of, the research on the Turkish case about the discrimination on religious grounds in the workplace. Basically, this discrimination in the workplace based on religion is yet another manifestation of the rather broader problem of rule of law. In the second place, we have also found out that state recognition of differences and identities does not necessarily lead to pluralism. So identity politics do not automatically translate into pluralism. And third, there's a need for an arbiter state, not a controlling state, but a state that will play the role of an arbiter. And just like in Katayun's, own work on discrimination in the workplace, there's a lot of room, in fact, for the law to play as a compass function towards creating a more tolerant society. And I think I can finish. Thank you.